Welcome to another episode of Between Drafts. I'm Nat,
Nathan.
and this is the podcast all about writing, editing, publishing, and trying to make it as an author. Today we're going to be talking about what happens after your book is done, because I turned in the final draft of Husk this morning. And so going into the last bit of production on that, I'm going to compare how that process is going, self-publishing it versus my experience once the final draft of Crypto Confidential was done and getting it published with Penguin Random House. So we'll get to that in a minute. Before that, how's everything going on your end?
Good, slow,
Slow.
but feels good. I started to reach out to cover artists for the book, just assuming I'm going to self-publish it. Needs a cover.
Yeah.
Arguably more important than the actual story when it comes to the original or the first round of marketing.
Yeah.
So trying to find somebody great,
Yeah.
and there's I found a lot of really good artists. It's somewhat hard to contact them.
We were talking earlier about how this is really becoming a recurring problem with going the self-publishing route, is just how hard it is to hire these really good people, either because you can't reach them or their timelines are just crazy.
Yeah.
You said one of the guys you talked to isn't available until December, right?
Yeah, and he's really good, obviously, but he's booked out until December 2025.
Good for him.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
He told me that. I was like, hey, well,
have you considered doubling your prices?
Yeah, legitimately.
If you're booked out for a year, you're not charging enough.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, but he was very nice and sent a couple artists that he has worked with or who he thinks they do really good work.
Cool.
Like, hey, reach out to these people.
How much did he charge, or does he charge for a book?
It looked like it was $27.50 for a full everything.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That feels low. 2,700. Is that kind of market rate now?
That's on the higher side.
Really?
From what I've seen.
Interesting. Okay.
But I found that there's a bigger range here than there is for editing services.
I believe that.
Editing is more of it's common that 3 to 4 cents per word, blah, blah, blah. And you can there's a couple websites that have standard editing rates.
Yeah.
So you can make sure the person that you're, considering working with is in the ballpark. With the cover art, it seems more all over the place.
Well, because I know some people will go on Fiverr.
Right.
Or is 99 Design still a thing? Do people still use that site?
I think I've used it for logos
I know
before.
it was for a while. But yeah, people will go on Fiverr and pay a couple $100 for a cover, which I think is probably always a mistake. It just seems like too low to get something good. And you can tell on Amazon.
I would, if I was an artist, I think my pitch would be your cover's going to pay for itself, or you're going to pay for how cheap you were with your cover.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That seems like
straightforward.
I'd almost, if I had to pick, I'd probably rather invest in the cover than the manuscript review.
Yeah. Crazy as it sounds, I think I would too.
Yeah. Because you could sell a less well-written book with incredible packaging, but it doesn't really matter how good the book is if the packaging looks super
thing I found is
quality.
Some of these cover artists have real kind of sway themselves in terms of
in the publishing industry.
That's
cool.
Big Instagram followings, these things. Like when they announce they've done a cover, it's like a big deal.
Oh, it's almost like a marketing.
It is marketing. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, right? It's like everybody involved in the book's production could also be helping market it. I'm excited to see if that does anything working with Scribe, because they've only done a couple of novels. This is one of the first novels they're doing. And so hopefully they're excited about it and want to talk about it, because I imagine they would like to get more fiction authors. They mentioned that they're interested in doing it.
Huge market.
Yeah. I think it's a big investment for almost anybody trying to do fiction. So I can see why there aren't many people who would work with them for a novel.
The nonfiction, the business owner to nonfiction book route is
way easier to justify. It's like, I know Eric, CEO of Scribe, says this all the time, that especially for a nonfiction book, your book doesn't have to make money to make you money, right? Like you could self-pub a really, really high quality nonfiction book and invest 50 grand into it. And even if it only ever sells $10,000 or $20,000 worth of copies, if that gets you one
or two speaking
or two speaking
engagements,
gigs,
boom,
you
you're
know,
good,
it's
or
like, yeah,
coaching or whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah. Tiago, the author of Building a Second Brain, mentioned that too, that I think he's made more, or at least has been offered more for speaking gigs off of his book than the book has sold. And like the first one I saw him post about a month after the book came out was for like 20 grand to go speak at a company
Wow.
for an hour.
I mean, that sounds like
Pretty sick.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I wouldn't, I don't think I would want to be on the speaking circuit like that, but if you're going to pay me 20 grand to come talk for an hour, like,
yeah, you would consider it.
Yeah, I would definitely consider it. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, got kids to feed, right?
Mhm.
And you got some news about your editing timeline too.
Yeah, so the editing is going to be basically May.
Yeah.
Which at first I was like, oh, it's so far. And then as I started to look into the cover art and all that, I was like, well, probably have to wait a couple months for the really good artists anyway.
These other parts are
so
going to take a
it's
while too.
not a huge deal.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, and I didn't get more into this, but I've started to think about I'm really big about flywheels as a writer and how do you get those going. And the first one that I really thought about was like writing online to the newsletter. Like, how do you, at the end of the day, like emails are just way more valuable than a follower. I think that it depends on what it is, but it feels more concrete, if that makes sense.
It's more durable,
right?
For sure.
So I like to think in flywheels when it comes to marketing anything. So I was like, okay, what are some good examples for a book? And this one guy, he actually his last name is actually the same as the first name of my main character in the book.
Yeah.
Which I saw that and I was like, huh.
I thought that was funny too
Yeah.
when you showed me the site. Yeah. So yeah, I see why Nathan likes this guy.
Apparently. I was like, I've only ever seen this name in like the English Premier League soccer.
Oh, it's funny.
And I just really liked it.
It's also the name of the law firm that my mom worked at for the last 20 years.
There you go. So, I was looking, and this guy, Ryan Cahill, I don't know how he pronounces his version of the name, but has a really excellent flywheel that seems like spinning really well for him. And it starts with a novella that comes before his first book. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. And there's a lot of stories that I could pull out and tell from before the time of when my novel starts. So I was like, all right, let's write a 20 to 30,000 word novella and see if we can't start collecting some emails specific to people who want to read fantasy fiction.
Yeah, I feel like a story about Cahill's dad.
I'm going with
or the
Edith.
Syndicate. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Edith. Yeah. Maybe a lot you could pull out there. It made me start thinking about it too.
I bet.
I was like, oh yeah, there are some good ideas here. I actually, I kind of want to do something sort of like this would be complicated for where you even shelf this on Amazon. But if you remember the first draft of Husk that I scrapped, there was this decent segment in the middle of Felix explaining his like theory of mind.
Oh, interesting.
And I kind of want to write that as a nonfiction book, but in the world of Husk. So I guess it could be, I don't know, I don't even know where you would categorize it on Amazon, because it would be like a theory of mind argument, like a philosophy book, but from his perspective as a character. Yeah. And there'd be like kind of fun little things I could do with that too. Like I could insert myself as a character in the world. And so like I'm interviewing him 100 years before the events of Husk, kind of like about the theory. There's something cool I think I could do there that would be a fun little project before Husk too.
I agree. You can even make it like a manifesto.
Yeah, totally. The thing I was surprised about is, do people like read novellas that they download from websites? How does he deliver them? Does he send you a PDF? It's a free download, right?
Yeah, he had a bunch of different options. You could download as PDF or EPUB. Really just how we send each other our books to do beta reads.
Neat.
Just EPUB has the little instructions to upload it to the Kindle. Boom.
It's probably a decently big thing, because I guess a lot of people who are reading stuff off of Wattpad and the other like fanfic type communities. I wonder what they usually pass back and forth. Is it EPUBs or?
No idea.
Yeah,
That's a
worth
good
looking
question.
into.
Yeah, because I didn't want a PDF.
Yeah. But I don't think PDF onto Kindle works that well. I feel like it'd be too scrunched.
So he just had a couple options. You picked which one, and boom. And it's nice because it's nice for him because you have to sign up to his mailing list to get it, which makes
Good way to get
sense.
the email. And then he also sells it on Amazon, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I do this. If I read something on Kindle and really like it, I'll probably get a paperback or hardcover or whatever from Amazon.
No, I like doing that too. Yeah, because I usually read on Kindle now. It's just easier to not carry. Especially, I hate mass market paperbacks. I really hate the print size. You know,
the tiny.
Yeah, the tiny with the tons of pages where it like keeps wanting to close on you.
Yep.
I didn't realize how much nicer the production size for nonfiction hardcovers was compared to like mass market fiction paperbacks.
Yeah.
And so I usually
like Femto Confidential look great and the hardcover.
Well, and it like mostly sits flat and stuff.
For sure.
But I remember I bought Mistborn, I think, or even like buying.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. The small print is just I don't like it. So I'll get the Kindle and then buy a paperback to put on the shelf as the visual reminder.
Yeah.
Good way to support the artist too.
Want to get into Husk? And where you're at?
So turned it in this morning. We were at coffee, 10 a.m. with about 6 hours to spare.
That's pretty good.
It's actually pretty good.
I'd probably be late.
I know. Well, I guess I was late on the original. I asked for an extra week because we had some time. We had some wiggle room. And I wanted to actually take my vacation in January, and then was just doing the last few edits. And what I did, I mentioned this last week, but I had the big list of things I thought I needed to fix, and I just deleted all of it and loaded the book on my Kindle, went to coffee shop, read it over a few days. I basically spent a week reading it and taking note of everything that felt like it actually needed to be fixed and changed.
Yeah.
And it was mostly sentence and paragraph level things. And then one actually fairly large structural change.
Is that the one we talked about?
One we talked about earlier that ended up having me delete about 7,000 words and pull two events together, in part because of something I've talked about a few times now, just like reducing the like ups and downs back and forth and the energy of the story and creating like a more consistent arc. And I really like what that change did, because you were talking about this a bit too a couple weeks ago, but like doing less, but doing those things bigger.
Yeah.
Right. Fewer bigger scenes, fewer bigger characters, fewer bigger settings. I think it's just better that way. And I like the part of the world that I introduced in the piece that I took out, but I think I'll introduce it in the next book.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about knowing that you want to return to this world. It's like,
Totally.
you're not really deleting it. You can copy paste that over to a different Doodle Doc. And hey, look, here's 7,000 words that maybe I can use in book 2 or 3.
And a lot of the stuff in the original book that I scrapped, I think I could reuse again for a novella or something.
For sure.
Like the original Lena character storyline, there's probably a good novella in there too. It's like, where did the bacteria come from? So that felt good. It also gets the word count down to 102,000 instead of 110, which isn't a huge change, but we've talked about this before. It does feel like the more punch you can pack in the first book to get people into the world, the better. Yeah. Because it's a pretty hard sell to get somebody to pick up because 100,000 words is going to be like 350 pages, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
I think so. Right. Well, yeah. It'd be like 350 to 400 pages. You think like 250 to 300 words per page, depending on how you're printing it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, about 350 pages, which is like, it's a nice length. You look at it and you say, okay, there's clearly meat here, but it's not intimidating.
It's not the first Way of Kings.
Yeah.
Take you
exactly.
a month.
Because Way of Kings is like 400,000 words.
Yeah, it's a beast.
I think he said, which is wild. It's like Atlas Shrugged is 550,000 words. I mean, it's a monster of a book. So, and I like Leviathan Wakes, the first of the Expanse series. Even that first one is 180,000 words. I was actually looking at this a little bit because what they've done with that series is so impressive to me, because it's 8 books they published them exactly 1 year after another.
That's sick.
Yeah, and it's funny because these were like George R. R. Martin's writing assistants, and so I think maybe they
Ah.
looked at I think they like looked at what happened with Game of Thrones, and they're like, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to be super diligent. Every single book has come out in June, starting, and it was like June 2012 through June 2020. Just every year on the dot it came out.
That's a good thing to shoot for, I feel like.
Yeah. And every single book is within like 10,000 words of 180,000 words. They're all almost the exact same length.
Yeah.
And so they actually look really good on a bookshelf next to each other. They look really consistent, almost like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Which is a cool way to do it. And so I was kind of inspired by that and started thinking, okay, that's what I should aim for. It's like, just get the next big book in the series out. Maybe I just like aim for May of every year so that, it's like, it's coming.
Yeah.
And so at least for if it's 3, 6 or whatever, like just keep that consistency. Because I work really well with deadlines. And so if I can like walk it back from that,
Boom.
yeah, I know I need to get them the manuscript to review end of December, which means I need it for my review by, Thanksgiving or October, which means I need a first draft. I don't think I want to do as much of a sprint as this one was, because I like technically started this in August.
Yeah.
Which is like really fast. So I'll have more time for this. But yeah, the other thing they did is they wrote 8 novellas. So they have the 8 main books and 8 novellas to expand the world.
I like novellas quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of side quest type things or ways to like deepen the lore, or, there's a character you really like, but they just don't fit as well into the main storyline or whatever.
Totally. I bet that helps them with getting the Amazon deal too, because that's a pretty big production TV show.
Yeah.
And so the more you flesh out the world, the more the scriptwriters have to work with.
Yeah. And just the more people like it.
Totally.
More stuff is usually good.
It's usually good. Yeah, exactly. If they like the world, they want to read more stuff in it. I always think about James Patterson's like Alex Cross novels.
I've read like 1 or 2 James Patterson.
Yeah, but he's written 30 novels or something with this character in this world, and it's not even like a sci-fi world or anything. It's just sort of the world, but thriller stories, and so you can do a lot with an existing world if people are interested in it. But yeah, so I turned it in this morning. Today is February 20th.
Yeah. So let's talk about everything that comes between turn in final draft to publish in May or June.
Yes. So we already have the cover done. So that was something that we got done before getting it finished. I gave the cover artist an early draft, and that was enough for her to go off of.
So did she read some of it then?
Yeah, she read a lot of it, actually.
Okay.
I don't know if she just read the first act or if she read all the way through. She said she enjoyed the book, so I assume she read a decent chunk of it.
And the final cover that you did, I think, is kind of based off something in your last 20,000 words.
It's you could argue that it's in the second chapter too.
Okay.
Because it's a server room.
Yeah.
Right, is what it's based off of, which gets introduced pretty early. I'd say the one on the cover comes later in the book, but it also works representing something earlier in the book.
It has the little symbol.
It has the symbol, yeah.
I don't think you, at least in your first draft, I think you introduced it earlier now, but I don't think you. I'm just impressed that she went and.
No, she did a really great job with that from the early draft, and so now that they have the final, we do copy editing and proofreading.
Okay, what does that mean?
So there's the obvious part of it, which is grammar, spelling, punctuation, capitalization, things like that. But the other thing that a good proofreader will do is they'll check for things like, oh, you named this character, but you didn't introduce their name.
Yep.
So like that was something I caught in my read this last week, where there was a character where I just started using his name, but I had introduced his name in an earlier sentence that I had deleted. And so it was really confusing.
Right.
It was like
it kind of came out of nowhere.
It kind of came out of nowhere, exactly. And so making little edits to say, to like explain how a character gets introduced. Usually another character calling them by their name, and then something like that. They'll check for continuity issues. So they'll try to read to be like, oh, you said this timeline earlier, but then you said this timeline here, right? It's like exactly how many days have gone by in the book, right? And making sure that's consistent. Or
because it's very easy in different drafts to be like, it was 2 weeks, but now in draft 2 it's
yeah,
4 days, and it's
I mean, even I
super
had to
easy.
like take a step back and write down the timeline
Yeah.
because it changed so much, right? I think the first draft took place over the course of a week, and this one takes course over like 2.5 months,
which is way better.
which is way better. Oh my God. Yeah. Big, really good change. So they'll look for that stuff. They'll point out things that haven't been described or that are like unclear. So if a setting is kind of thin, or a character or a piece of technology or an object, something like that, they'll point that out too. Or if something like is inconsistent, they'll look for those kinds of things.
So in terms of our hierarchy of editing, I would basically say you're done with story, act, and even like sequence. It's more on the paragraph, sentence
And
stuff
sentence
now.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have 4 weeks for that. And
From today?
From today.
Okay.
And so I think what'll happen is they'll do their first round of edits and send it to me in about 2 weeks, and then all of a few days to review all of those changes. And so the way it worked at Penguin Random House was they sent me a Word doc with track changes on.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah, just extensively marked up. One with like, edits, but then also comments saying like, this is confusing or whatnot. And so I'll have a few days to review and implement those and send them back. Then they'll do a final copy edit. So I didn't know this terminology difference. Proofreading is like more general, more broad. It includes the like, this is confusing type stuff. And then copy editing is specifically periods, commas, like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So they'll do that.
Your grammar sucks.
Oh yeah, my grammar's terrible. Yeah, no, I still don't know how commas work. I know it like definitely throws people.
Commas are just, to me, more about what's the vibe that I'm going for here.
Yeah.
And does the comma, like, I don't care at all.
I'm purely a vibe comma
yeah,
user.
I couldn't care less if it's like a clause with a different kind of clause and it needs a comma. I'm like, well, if it sounds like it needs one, I'll put one. If not, I don't really care.
Yeah, and I use sentence fragments to like create vibe in a paragraph too, which it's like, okay, is that bad writing or is it not? Because it like kind of works sometimes, but also it can throw the reader, right, which you don't necessarily want. So they'll do all those edits, and it's 4 weeks from now that we lock the manuscript, and then another 4 weeks for layout.
Okay. So layout means?
Layout will be like what font we use, what font size, what margins on the page, kerning, like all of those types of things.
Will that be different for ebook, paperback? Are you doing a hardcover? Are you doing paperback?
I'm going to do a hardcover. One thing that we're still deciding, and I need to talk to Eric about this a little bit more, is you definitely want to do a paperback and a hardcover, because a lot of people will buy the paperback because it's cheaper. Some people prefer the hardcover, so they'll buy that. But if a bookstore buys it, they usually want to buy the hardcover. And so you can list your book for distribution to bookstores on what's it called?
Ingram's part.
Yes, Ingram. And you usually want to list a hardcover there because that's what bookstores are going to look for. But then on Amazon, your paperback might sell better.
But it's nice to have the hardcover for like a price anchor.
Totally. But the thing that I'm debating is what part of me wants to do, and I just need to find out if this is a terrible idea or not, is just release the hardcover at first, and then in 3 to 6 months, release the paperback. The nice thing about that is it lets me do another round of marketing.
For sure. It's a new launch.
Exactly. It's a new launch. It's a new edition, right? And that's sort of what they do with books at publishers too, right? They might.
It's 100% what they do.
Yeah. They'll just launch the hardcover at first, and then the paperback comes a little bit later. So I need to decide if I want to do that or just release them both at launch, because the other thing I could do is in 3 to 6 months, I could do a mass market paperback.
Yeah.
So I could launch the paperback now at, call it $15. And then in 6 months, do one of those like smaller, cheaper prints and sell it for $8.
Yeah.
Right. It was like extending the product line a bit.
What I imagine the layout is different for paperback, hardcover, and ebook.
Yes. So the font will be the same. but then the spacing and everything you need to adjust based on what you're printing it for or how you're printing it. And so they'll handle all of that, and they'll just send me a PDF of what it's going to look like.
Nice.
And then I can like mark it up and send it back.
So that's 4 weeks, 4 weeks.
4
Is
weeks,
there
4
an
weeks.
audiobook?
Yes. I don't know when we're recording that.
Are you recording it? Or
I'm not
else?
going to do this audiobook just because I'm not a voice actor. I think I could do it. I think I could learn.
The Crypto Confidential one went pretty well.
Yes, it did. But that was still kind of like a memoir, so it made sense.
It's from your point of view.
Yeah, it's all from my point of view. It made sense to be in my voice. The thing I would be worried about doing a good job of is all the different character voices.
Yeah, you doing Elena might be hilarious.
Yeah. I think it'd be really hard to do the women's voices. I could do some of the voices really well. I think I could do Felix and Vance, and it's like
Vance would be fun.
Those guys are so big in my head that that would be really fun. But yeah, I wouldn't want to throw the reader by.
So it's one voice actor doing the audiobook.
Most likely. I'm gonna look at the price to do a full cast.
So so you have option of one voice actor, full cast, and then will you get like to pick out of a couple people, or are you told, hey, these are the people? Like, how does that work?
I'm not sure actually.
Fair
I need
enough.
to find out because that's
I
important.
think audiobooks they're huge. Right
Oh
now.
yeah, that's where you make a good chunk of the money.
You'll probably get
often
20-30% of your sales through
Yeah,
audio.
I think 40% of the Crypto Confidential sales are audio.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's like 40% audio, 30% Kindle, 30%.
Note to self: another person I need to hire.
Yeah.
Audio.
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
Start reaching out for that right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a little bit easier because you book time in a studio, and then, well, honestly, the thing that might be harder to find is a really good producer. Because I think voice actors are a little easier to find because it's a lot of voice actors who are looking for work, and there's more of them to go around than there are really great audiobook producers who will like write up the script, which might be a little bit different than just reading the book.
Really?
Because there might be marks for pauses. And
I know nothing about audio, like creating an audiobook.
Yeah, so when I did the Crypto Confidential one, the producer was in the studio with me, and she was like outside, and she would stop me and have me reread lines that I might not have done quite right. She was following along and making suggestions and critiques as we went, which was really helpful. And then there was also an editor on the recording with us who would like mark stuff that they needed to like cut and post or adjust so they could get a really clean recording. And then they had a cool system set up where they sent the day's recording to a team in the Philippines. The team in the Philippines would edit it overnight and have it basically done by the next morning. And then they would tell us if there was anything that we missed that we need to re-record. And so the first thing we did the next day was record anything we got wrong the day before.
And that feedback loop was super tight.
Super tight.
Nice.
So we got it all done in 3 days.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, okay, so there's the producer, the editor, the recording studio, the voice actor, and then this other editing team QAing it overnight. It's like a lot of people that go into it.
That is a lot.
Yeah, it's a big effort. So yeah, I mean, hopefully I get some say on the voice actors because I want them, voice actor or actors, because obviously I want it to sound good.
Right. I mean, the voice actor's huge. If I get an audiobook and I don't like the voice, it doesn't matter how good the story is.
Well, and people will also buy audiobooks if they're narrated by voice actors they really like.
Kind of like what I was talking about with the cover art.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like another marketing vector. So one thing I want to look at is the guy who did the voice for Project Hail Mary.
Is it really good? I've read the book. I haven't listened to the audio.
Yeah, I've listened to bits of the audiobook just because I heard how good it was, and it's exceptional. And whenever you look at threads of what are the best narrated audiobooks, it always comes up.
Yeah.
So he's like very known.
Yeah.
And so that might be worth investing in, because just having his name attached to it could be really valuable.
For sure.
So I want to look into that. But I bet he has a year-long queue or something.
Right.
Like I'm sure that it's pretty hard to hire some of those names. And you can always reproduce the audiobook. This has actually gotten very common now, is that a book will do a single voice actor for the initial release, and then they'll re-release the audiobook a few years later with like a full cast production with
Kind of
sound effects and
What you
everything.
were talking about, just another product to be able
Yeah.
to sell.
Another product, another chance to market the book.
Yeah.
So we got to do that. Got to finish the back copy, which is the same as the Amazon description copy that we were working on earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in a pretty good place now.
I liked it.
Yeah, your feedback was super helpful. And I sent that off to them again.
Nice.
So we'll see what they think of that. Once that's locked, then we can finish the full cover. So right now we just have the front cover, but once they have that, they can do the spine and the back so that we'll actually know what the whole thing looks like.
Wait, say that again? The spine and the back cover
And the
have
back
to be
cover.
okay, will those come from, because so when I've been looking at cover artists, a lot of them will produce like a kind of widescreen version, and
Yeah.
you chop a narrow bit of that for the front, and then the rest like wraps around the
Mhm.
spine and back. Is that how this will work? Will be a little
Yeah.
different.
It'll be something like that. Yeah. So, but they needed the description for the book done to do
To
the
make
back
it look,
cover.
to make it look good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you would think about at this stage that I don't think I'm going to focus on really for Husk is endorsements, blurbs. This is a big thing for Crypto Confidential because the nonfiction book game, is so focused on blurbs.
For sure, you got some good ones too.
Yeah. And blurbs are kind of bullshit. Like I hate to say that, but it is sort of a game.
Who knows who? Kind of thing.
Who knows who wants to get their name out there because it's an opportunity for them to market themselves by putting their name on your book, right? Like there's a lot of kind of back scratching and there's a lot of editors talking to each other, saying like, oh,
if you do this, I'll do this.
if you can get this author for this book, I'll get you this author for this book, right? And so when you see the blurbs on books, it's worth knowing that it's sort of like funny business going on in the back. And the hard thing for this is going to be I just don't have any big name connections in fiction.
Mhm.
So I don't really know who I would reach out to try to get one. So I think I'm just not going to focus on it. And it matters less in fiction. It definitely helps if you have big names to endorse it.
You could slap Andy Weir on there. You're slapping Andy Weir's
That would be
name
sick.
on there.
But I it'll just be very hard to get it without. I think that once the book is out for a year or two and hopefully it's doing well and people have read it, it'll be easier to do another version of the cover or something with those. But
there's a lot of special editions and things like that going on right now, which is great way to.
Or if a publisher picks it up, right?
100%.
Like they might want to shop it around to get some endorsements.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to focus on that too much this time, which honestly is such a relief. It was such a drag. That was the worst part of the process last time. Yeah, you're reaching out to these very, famous, influential, whatever people.
Yeah.
And you're asking them to read your book,
which is a big
huge ask.
Big ask.
Yeah. And they're all busy. You're mostly getting rejected.
Yeah.
And so, that's
it's like a theme of
tough
the publishing industry.
Yeah, exactly. They're just constantly getting rejected. And so that was tough. It took so much time. It was a couple of weeks of dedicating a decent amount of my brain power to that.
I bet.
And I was just like, it's not what I want to work on.
How are you thinking about, so if you're not doing blurbs, and I think that makes sense, like probably, I don't know, not the highest leverage marketing you could do. How are you thinking about the marketing? Because you got, let's call it 3 months.
Yeah. I want to talk to Eric about this more because there's two ways I'm thinking about it. One is the profit maximization angle, which is what's the most money I can make off of launching the book.
And that would be specifically at launch?
Yeah, at launch and leading up to launch. And I think the answer to that would be to pre-sell it through my site.
Yes.
So put a Shopify store on my website, pre-sell a like $30 or $40 version, which is like a nice foil hardcover with the audiobook, with the Kindle version.
Like a bundle.
Like a bundle.
I wish Amazon let you bundle.
I know. It's crazy that they don't. I understand why they don't.
Yes.
Because it's separate rights and, there's a whole mess of lumping them together. But if you are self-publishing it and selling it through your own site, then you can totally do that. So I like that idea a lot.
I do too.
I really like that idea. I think that would do well. I would be excited to buy that from somebody that I follow.
I'm gonna write this down for
Yeah.
us to do a full episode on like how you're thinking about marketing
Yeah.
and selling and profit and all that
Totally.
at a later date, but let's keep going.
But then the other side of it is the Amazon flywheel maximization,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is at the end of the day, 98% of the sales, if this is successful, are going to be through Amazon. And the main way people are going to find it, aside from word of mouth, is Amazon recommendations. And, people who read this also read. And the way that happens is through buying activity on Amazon
And reviews.
and the Amazon charts. And so there's also an argument for not pre-selling the book at all, doing a big launch week where I sell it at a relatively steep discount. So the paperback I wouldn't be able to discount that much just because of cost of goods, but
Right.
I could sell the Kindle for like $2.99
Yeah.
for a week, for launch week,
Yeah.
to get as many purchases as possible.
Just get it out in the world.
Get it out in the world, get it to the top of those charts, get it on people's devices, right? So they're not like, oh yeah, I should go buy Nat's book. It's like, no, it's already on your Kindle,
Yeah.
right? Hopefully you get to it at some point,
Yeah.
and then it starts getting in the recommendation algorithm.
The other argument that I would think of for doing your own site is you get those emails.
Yes. And that's really good too,
Yeah.
right? Because you can follow up with them and say like, hey, please go review it. It doesn't really matter if they didn't buy it on Amazon for reviewing it, because Amazon still lets you review it because, people buy it in bookstores. They buy it other places.
Yeah, that's true. No, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's not going to have the verified review badge, but that doesn't matter
That's
that
fine.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus they can go review it on Goodreads, and Goodreads reviews show up on Amazon now
Yeah, because it's owned by Amazon.
because it's owned by Amazon. Yeah. So, that part of it is really attractive too.
Mhm.
So I don't know what the answer is right now. Part of me is thinking I should just do the Amazon maximization, but I don't know. I'm still
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
And again, I can do both,
Mhm.
right? Like I can do the pre-sale on my site and say this pre-sale version, it's just this $30 bundle. I'm not going to pre-sell just the Kindle or just the audiobook. Like if you want those, get them on Amazon at launch and I'll remind you of them.
Yeah.
But if you want this like cool limited edition pre-launch version, here it is.
Well, yeah.
And just see if anyone bites.
Yeah.
That feels
I think
like
if an author that I liked was gonna do like a bundle on their site, I would probably get it.
yeah. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like having the different versions.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
it doesn't make sense to buy them all separately.
no, and there might be a way I can make it fun too, or like make it kind of unique.
Mhm.
Maybe I can do a special foil cover, right, or something.
Yeah.
In case it's something that somebody wants to grab. So I'm still deciding on that part of it, but there'll be something along those lines. What I'm
Nice.
not gonna do is try to do a huge podcast
Tour.
circuit again.
Yeah.
I'll definitely go on some. I think if anybody wants to talk about it, I'd love to talk about it. But it's just very different from the nonfiction.
Are you thinking about
Marketing.
any? I feel like in sci-fi fantasy, there's more like book review blogs that are
Yeah.
decent size, booktube,
Yeah,
book
yeah.
talk, anything like that, or just not really.
I want to do that and use those. I think it's going to be easier once the book is out for a little bit and has some reviews
Yeah.
and has a bit of traction,
Mm-hmm.
because I've got to imagine those guys are getting pitched. I mean, actually, I know they're getting pitched all the time because I am one of those guys. And like the amount of spam I would get, people saying, my book is coming out, it's about this, blah, blah, blah. And you just have to assume that it's not going to be, like I hate to say it, you assume it's not going to be a good book or something you're interested in or do particularly well. And they're hoping for you to make their book succeed, right? Versus if a book is already doing well and has good reviews, and then you reach out to these people and say, hey,
Yeah.
I have this book that's doing well. I think your audience might really like it. I'd love to send you a copy. No worries if you don't get to it, but if you do, I can promote your review of it on my Instagram with 170,000 followers or something, right? Like that pitch gets a lot more interesting. And this is a nice thing about self-pub versus trad pub is trad pub, they want you to line up everything to happen during launch week. But again, it's the hardest to promote your book before anyone's read it. Like,
Especially as a debut.
yeah, especially as a debut.
It's very different for you launching something than who's big sci-fi.
Blake Crouch. Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's funny we're both thinking of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like Blake Crouch he can get a New York Times book review or whatever because people are excited for the next recursion or whatever. So I think it'll be easier to do that stuff once it's been out for a bit. And again, it's just nice to be in this headspace of I'm doing at least 3 books in this world.
Yeah.
This is my main focus for at least the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
This one, I don't need to line everything up with the launch, and it's actually going to be easier to do
I like that.
a lot of these things once it has a little bit of traction. So
I'm going to come rewatch that segment when I launch mine because I know I'll be like, I get this in front of a bajillion people.
And I mean, if I could get that,
Yeah.
right? If I thought that there was a good chance of getting those things by investing the time in them now, I would totally do them.
Yeah.
But from an ROI perspective, I think it just makes a lot more sense to like get it out to my audience and my network first, get some of that
And
initial
then
support,
let's
and
call it
then
September, October roll around.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe now it's starting to move on these platforms or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can get, some of those videos lined up for pre-Christmas or something.
Totally. Yeah. I think what I'll do is I'll start drafting Husk 2. And then when I finish the first draft, I'll take a month and let it sit. And while it's sitting, do some more marketing for Husk 1, because I'll need something to do during that time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been writing down what you've been, so we got half of February, let's call it March, April, and I don't know when in May you're looking at launching.
Yeah.
this.
Thinking like last week.
Okay. So let's call it 3 months, three
Yeah.
full months. Proof and copy edits, audiobook, spine and back cover, marketing, arts,
That's most of it.
anything else in there?
Not really. The one thing that's nice with, again, the self-pub versus trad pub is we're going to do print on demand for the books. So I don't need to stock a warehouse with all the books
You're not going
beforehand.
to drive cassette crazy with your garage.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I've got the extra room in the condo. So
There you go.
I'm actually thinking if I do the My Site thing, I will just use that room as like a logistics center until, because I've done a 3PL before when we had our tea company, like I know how it works, and it's a great solution when you're ready for it. But I also don't mind doing the, stop at UPS at the end of the day for a couple of months.
Yeah.
If it makes sense. I think it'd be just kind of fun to have my own little store
Yeah, it would
for
be.
stuff. There's something
Absolutely.
neat about that.
I agree.
So got to get that set up. But yeah, I don't have to, there is that month and a half or so in the trad pub timeline of getting the first run of books printed and sending them to warehouses.
So quickly,
We don't have to do.
we don't have a ton of time, but I'm curious, when you turned in Crypto Confidential, do you remember how long it was from then until launch?
Yeah, I turned it in January. Well, okay, so I turned in the mostly final on October 15th
Of 23?
of 23.
Okay.
They did, my editor did his last review and sent it back to me before Thanksgiving. And then I did my last edits and gave it back to them Jan 2. So Jan 2 was the equivalent of today.
Yeah.
And then it came out July.
7 months later.
Yeah, July 15th or something.
Call it 7 months.
Yeah, 7 months later.
That's not as big of a difference as I expected.
No, it's pretty
actually.
close. And actually Scribe's doing a slightly faster timeline for me. They usually do about 7 months with people. So it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
A lot of that's basically because it just takes a while to go through each of these steps, and the layout might have stuff we need to tweak, right?
Totally.
And when we actually get versions of it on our Kindles or get the first ARCs printed, we might find stuff that we have to fix, right? You kind of have to leave some wiggle room in. But yeah, I think it's going to go by fast. May's going to come up quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, 3 months.
Anything else that you want to hit on for that process?
No, I mean, just it's weird not having the book to work on anymore. Even this morning after I emailed it in, I felt a little bit of okay, what do I do with my hands?
Mhm.
Like, this has been the number one thing that I work on every week
For a while.
for a while. I mean, especially since August when I did the 1 month sprint, it's just been like hard charging iteration, try to get it done well as reasonably fast as possible. So it's very weird not to have that now. And so there is that bit of like,
Yeah.
like, what am I doing next
Yeah.
week? And I think what I'm going to try to do is get in a lighter routine for a little bit of, and this is what I did for Crypto Confidential and for the first version of Husk, is like 9 to noon is book time. And then 1 to 4 ish is like other work time. And so that's when I'll work on like the AI course and my site and blog posts and all those things that I've been kind of neglecting the last month or so while I get this done.
Absolutely.
So hopefully get back to a little bit more balanced of a routine, but also every time I say that, I just end up like sprinting on something else. We'll see what actually happens. I'm excited about the nonfiction fiction book though.
That Felix Manifesto
the Felix
idea.
Manifesto. That one I think is going to be really fun to write. Yeah. And so I'm excited to hack on that a bit because it's also like I was a philosophy major in college. I love this stuff. There's some of it in Husk, but
not as much as you might like.
I wanted to like put it in there so that it's not just like, oh, this is purely an action story. It's like, no, there are a few points where it goes on for like 1,000 words more than it needs to about some concept because I like that. Yeah. But being able to do a full, I call it 30,000 word novella booklet on that topic, I think will be really fun and a nice change of pace and good world building. For sure. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right. Next week, do we know what we're talking about next week?
No.
Oh, okay. Let's finally do our mailbag episode.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, things you want to hear us talk more about related to writing, publishing, editing, making it as an author, our drafts, our audience building, whatever else, then send it to us on Twitter or email betweendraftspod@gmail.com. And I think we'll just pick from that next week.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.